Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A View from the Top. I'm Adrian Cropley. A View from the Top is a regular podcast from the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence, where I interview some of the world's leading communication professionals as we explore their career journey. Today I get to talk to an amazing communication professional. Anne-Marie Blake is currently Global Communication Lead with HSBC's Wholesale Credit and Lending. She's a highly experienced and award-winning senior communication professional with a successful background in large and complex international corporate organizations. She's an accomplished leader with experience managing teams in Europe, Asia, and the US. Anne-Marie has led end-to-end change communication for strategic, large-scale people change, digital and IT transformation programs, also HR transformations, mergers and acquisitions. You could say that strategic change communication is in her blood. However, she is truly a leader within our profession in many volunteer roles, including executive board member of the IABC and a member of the PRCA Ethnicity Equity Board, among many other roles championing our profession. Anne-Marie, welcome and thank you for joining me.
No, and thank you for that amazing introduction. I had to double check that it was me you were talking about for a second. Never actually realised what we were doing.
What's that mean?
Until you're kind of reflecting on events like this. So thank you for that. That is happening.
It's amazing when you kind of look back and you go, oh wow, yeah, actually, when you kind of hold that mirror up and these are the things you do. And look, as we travel our careers, we kind of build that wealth of experience, don't we? You're in an organization for a period of time and we learn through our successes, our mistakes, our, interactions with people. So it's nice sometimes just to reflect.
Thank you.
So leading in organizations and taking, executive roles. I mean, working with executives is a tough challenge, and we'll talk about that one a little bit later. But I'd love to start with what is it that you're doing now? I mean, you've got a global role with, one of the world's biggest banks. Tell me a little bit about that role. What is it all about?
Yeah, well, I could tell you, but I'd have to shoot you afterwards. No, that's just a joke. Working in banks is like highly confidential, but I can tell you broadly what I'm doing. So, as with many other organisations, particularly large, global, complex organisations such as HSBC, there's a lot of change going on. And I think I read somewhere last year that, the pandemic has really accelerated change by about 7 years. So it's super, super busy. So what I am actually doing is taking my kind of business experience, as it were. So I generally work with business teams and with business leaders to help them manage the people side of change. So the technology people do the technology change, and the OD people do the OD change, and I help manage the people side of that, whether that's helping the teams that are working on the change feel a belonging, part of the team, understand what they're doing, understand the success on the way, or the PR within the firm about kind of what we're delivering. So translating I'm in investment banking at the moment, global banking, so some quite complex financial terms into language that you can explain to a friend down the pub, if you're going to the pub. So I do quite a lot of that. So that's kind of what I'm doing in my day job with HSBC. But as you said, I have serial things that I do outside of HSBC as well.
And I do want to talk about those because, I think you get to a period in your career where you've got that experience and you want to put it back in, and you truly do. I mean, volunteering the way you do, and on big roles, the IABC Executive Board, but is by no means a small role. How long have you been on the Executive Board with IABC now? And tell me a little bit about that and what you're getting out of that and what you feel you're giving back to the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is an ambition of mine to take on more what we call non-executive director roles. And I've been a board member of the UK and Ireland chapter for a couple of years. And then I just happened to be in Vancouver and I met the previous chair, Ginger Homan, who you will know, who said to me, why don't you apply? And I was like, no, I'm not going to apply because I'll never get in and it's not for people like me, kind of, the typical things you stop. And I think it was midnight of the closing date, our time, so probably still a couple of hours kind of US time, that I decided to put the application in, and I didn't actually expect to hear anything from it. And the application process is really rigorous. So 2 rounds of structured interview. But actually, now I'm in, I really, really love it, because it is actually what I hadn't appreciated before I joined the executive board is, unlike kind of running at the regional, the chapter level, you are running a reasonable sized firm in terms of turnover and helping to set the strategic direction. So I enjoy it from that point of view. Met some amazing people from across the world that I would never normally have met. Unfortunately, because we've been meeting remotely these past 2 years, we've been doing that virtually, but I just literally cannot wait to go meet Alan and Danielle and the rest of the team when we get to New York in June. But we have some really interesting conversations about the future of the organisation that we're all passionate about. We're all volunteers, and it helps me bring some of the kind of disciplines that I've learned over many years working in kind of financial services to kind of the voluntary organisation. So, I love it. I meet people, fantastic.
Yeah, look, they're absolutely fulfilling roles. I mean, after doing the role myself on the executive board, I just, you get so much out of doing that, and it's a real sanity check too, to how an association works versus a business, and what you bring to the table and what you get from the whole experience. Flipping to one of the other boards that you're part of, and I thought this was really, really fascinating, was the ethnicity and...
Read that one, you took it to read. It's a race, ethnicity and equity board. So it was formed 2 years ago, and it's something I've been thinking about for a little while, actually. So every year, I've been in the profession a long time, I read the state of the profession census. And it tells me exactly the same thing every year. So it tells me that the profession is largely occupied by men, or at the senior levels. So it's pretty equal, but at the senior levels it's men. That they're predominantly kind of white. That in the UK anyway, that 20% of them went to public school. 7% of the population will normally go to public school, and very few identify as non-white. And every year, you read the census and everyone wrings their hands and says, "Isn't this terrible? Something must be done." And I've been in the profession a long time, and nothing ever is done apart from words. So it just coincided with a couple of things, really. One was we were in the middle of lockdown, number one. And the other one was around the time of kind of all the George Floyd stuff that was going on in the US. And so we were just on a meeting, we said, look, we just need to do something. So with about kind of 12 like-minded people, so we're chaired by an absolute tour de force called Barbara Phillips. We got together and we set up our board from scratch. And to be fair, the PRC were really helpful in facilitating that. So we literally started from scratch in terms of agreeing what our goals should be, what our focus was going to be, and how we were going to support people. So we've all got responsibilities for different areas. Mentoring is something that I'm really passionate about. So I've set up PRISM, which is the mentoring process. So about 6 months through our mentoring program. And then we've got another colleague of mine, Ems, is really passionate about kind of men in PR. So he's kind of working on that. But we've got lots of, we're also kind of quite keen on the pay gap. So, most people have heard of the gender pay gap. Not as many people are as familiar with the ethnicity pay gap, which there is. So that's kind of one of the things that we're lobbying for. But again, it's volunteering, within our profession, the profession that we're part of, there are just so many people that are really passionate about making it better for the people that are coming up, that it kind of really does impress me, and I'm really happy to play my part with that.
And it's quite surprising, isn't it? I'm surprised that I'm shocked every time I hear the fact that we still have gender pay gaps, and of course now with issues around ethnicity pay gaps as well, and cultural differences. When we talk about it so much in our society today, why this is still such a big issue. And it's
it's one of the things that brought it home to me, because as I said, it's something that has been talked about for a long time, so you read the census, you roll your eyes, and then you kind of carry on. Is I wasn't at this bank, I was at another big bank, and we had a kind of big leadership conference, and someone came up to me. So yeah, you can't see me because this is a podcast, but I am black, and another kind of young black girl came up to me, and she says, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know there was anyone that looked like you that was in PR." So that was kind of shock.
Wow.
Number one, at this level. So previously, I hadn't really done anything kind of above the parapet. But I thought to myself, this is kind of ridiculous. So, there is a saying that if you can see it, you can be it, which is why I'm a bit more kind of out there now. I wasn't before. I was kind of just doing my thing below the radar.
Yeah, well, look, and full credit, because it is so important to be the role model for people, and particularly in the area of change. And it's really funny because I'm starting to see the theme here now, where you've got that passion for change, you work in change, and then you're on boards that are really about making a change within our profession. So I'm just so pleased that you're part of all of that. So let me go back just a little way. Where did it all start for you? Did you wake up one day and said, I want to be a communication professional?
When I was decided on my career, if it was actually something I had an active decision in, I'm not sure that comms would have made the top 100, because no one knows that it exists. And actually, when I go into schools now and give presentations, again, people aren't really sure that they think there's this thing called PR, but what they think is PR isn't actually what PR is. They think it's all whining and dining and spin, which obviously we know that it's not. But originally I was due to join the Navy. I'd spent many years in the Sea Cadets, which, I was going to say, not many people know. I guess more people know that. But it was in those days. I know. So two things stopped me joining the Navy. One is I can swim, but I don't like swimming. So that was number one. But the thing that stopped me most is actually, at that time, women didn't go on the ships. They had to be confined to office work. So there were no women on ships in those days. Yeah, so I didn't, and I joined the bank because that's what everyone did at my school. Well, you joined the bank because it was a career for life. I joined a different bank. It was a career for life. They looked after you. There was literally an HR person with a spreadsheet that says, Anne-Marie, we think her potential is this. Okay, so, and she's been doing that job for 18 months, so let's kind of promote her. That's kind of how it worked when I first started. So I worked in the business. I didn't start off in comms, and then I had a really great job in marketing. I was a head of student banking at the time. And what that exposed me to, because I was the bank's spokesperson, is lots of journalists and how PR did their thing. I was working for the most amazing boss she has been really instrumental in driving my career. The support, mentorship, friendship that she's given me has been second to none. And she got a big job working in Europe, and she said to me, Anne-Marie, I need someone to come and do my comms. Do you want to come and do it? And I was like, well, I don't really know much about comms. She goes, that doesn't matter, you'll figure it out. And so that's what I did. I literally, and there was not even any Google in those days. So, if that challenge was happening now, I'd say, I'll just Google it. Someone has done it somewhere before. But I was reasonably well networked within the firm. And so I went, and I was head of communications and PR for the European division of a bank with rarely any comms and PR experience. And it also coincided with, it was a real, I call it, as Dickens says, the best of times and the worst of times. So, I got to travel, do some amazing work, run some amazing events, meet some amazing people that are still my friends today. But it also coincided with the financial crash. So my last period of it was around financial crash time. And so what I spent a lot of my change experience doing was kind of managing people out of roles, disposing of businesses. And actually, I left in the December. I think the crash was the September, and I left in the December and decided to branch out on my own. But, I know, looking at someone's CV, you think, they've worked, in banking for a long time, but you're not getting the same experience all the time. I would say you get to do some amazing pieces of work that you don't get to do anywhere else.
That's it, and also big organisations. I spent many years with Ericsson as an organisation, because it was a big global organisation. You were forever changing and moulding and adapting to different roles in the organisation. So I think it gives you that experience to go, so what is it that I kind of want to do? And I think if you look at some of those those early roles, and I'm already hearing you got to travel a fair bit, and maybe that became a bit of a passion because you work at a global level. Was that the real driver that I want a global role because I had those early experiences, working across countries, or?
Yeah, I mean, doing change and cultural change, I've always been fascinated by people, and I've always, liked understanding kind of what drives people and what makes people tick. And in a global firm, it gives you the opportunity. So my morning will start with me having conversations with my teams in Asia, and then it will end with me having conversations with the teams in the US. And they're all very different for different kind of reasons. And I've kind of managed kind of multiple teams as well. And you just get to meet so many different people and have so many different experiences. One of the examples that I use is change is sometimes tough on people. And so one of the things I did was a program of activities called Thrive, which worked really well here where I'm talking to you from in the UK. We put about 500 people through it. And we thought, this is a really great idea. Let's take it to the teams in India. And the first time that we ran it, it bombed. And we were like, we're not quite sure what's happened here. And actually, we had to quickly redo it that evening. And it was because culturally, you look after other people before you look after yourself. Does that make sense? There's some stuff around that, and also some of the kind of imagery that we used about food wasn't quite right. So we quickly engaged the team and rewrote it, and actually it's worked really well. And I know Mark, the partner that I ran it with, he's gone on to run it several more times in India. So it's just those little nuances. You all work for one firm, you all have the same culture. But there's all those little nuances that kind of help you understand people a little bit better. And you know what, if I hadn't, worked for, different banks, I'd never have been to India. It was never on my travel list. Never have been to China. Possibly would have gone to the US, but it's given me a real different outlook on travel.
So does this mean we need to get you from the UK to Australia next?
Yes, although I've never been to Australia, mainly because my partner, don't laugh, he is frightened of snakes and spiders. So even though one of my best friends lives in New Zealand, I've never been to visit her, but I am. Another one of my best friends is relocating back, much to my sadness. She's going to be leaving the country probably at the end of this year, so I will have a trip to Australia.
You're going to have to make the trip. And look, can I tell you, for somebody that is absolutely terrified of snakes and spiders, I live here. So when you come, you'll just have to let me know, because the reality is when you work at that global level and you're on these the volunteer boards that work on a global level as well, it's a great opportunity to tap into your network when you travel. I must admit, I'm never short of someone to go and see or actually stay with most of the places I go around the world.
Yeah. I mean that's a great thing about IBC, isn't it? I'm going to Lisbon in a few weeks. With Bonnie's coming over. Bonnie is also on the IBC, a previous chair, to talk to university students, and that's another great opportunity, isn't it? Just to show the guys about what we can offer, and why it's great to have a global outlook.
Well, it is, and I think the landscape's changed amazingly, and I think COVID, as negative as it has been a great positive as well for the world in getting people to connect in different ways, and rethink boundaries and borders, because I know there's opportunities. I mean, I was on a call just yesterday to one of the African universities and giving a guest lecture, which I did little bits of that, but that just seems to be a lot more of that is happening now. And I think that role of mentorship too will transcend all of the borders. So I wouldn't be surprised after the podcast you're not going to get people that are in contact with you, particularly given your work with diversity.
Bring on.
So what's going through your career, what passions did you develop as part of your career that says, we've talked about change, and obviously that's been a big competency area for you, but I guess you sharpen your passions as you go along. And where do you think your passions lie now in the profession?
Oh, goodness me. I think in some ways I must be a frustrated teacher. in some ways, because there's a couple of things that I really am passionate about. So one is about kind of professionalism in our industry. So I was talking to someone the other day. I just happened to be in a club, and I could hear someone saying that she was a PR guru. She's got 0 qualifications in PR, never worked in PR, but has picked something up and is making a living being a PR guru. So I think there's and there are lots of concerns around that. So I am really kind of passionate about helping people to understand some of the basic theories so they can put them into practice in the workplace. So that's why I kind of teach introduction to PR and strategic PR planning, because, unlike when I was kind of thrown in at the deep end, and just kind of told to get on with it in a nice way, and I managed to get on with it in a nice way, it's quite nice for people not have to do that. So just to have a basic understanding of basic PR and communications theory, so you can apply that into your day-to-day role. So that's one thing I'm passionate about. The other thing I'm passionate about is, and I'm not sure that enough people recognise or acknowledge kind of how they get to where they get to. So obviously I'm hardworking, and I've got a bit of knowledge, but ultimately I've only got to where I've got to because people have given me those opportunities that I have had. I have been brave enough to say yes to. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is mentoring. So I'm really strong. I mentored through IABC. Laura is my mentee, and she's fantastic. I learned lots from her as well. And I also set up the Read mentoring as well. And because I think that unless you know the keys to unlock your career development, there's a couple of models that I talk people through, then you can sometimes get stuck and frustrated. And actually, I think there's lots of untapped talent there that we can, just maybe help and mentor and nurture through. Because, it's a really exciting time to be part of comms. It's an industry that's, in the UK, delivering about 16 billion to the economy. So, there's lots of exciting things going on. So let's help people at whatever stage. It's not just about mentoring younger people. Maybe people are transitioning or want to get into comms. Let's help them be successful.
Yeah, and look, and thank you for sharing that passion. It's certainly something for me as well, where I've been very much about giving back to the profession, mentoring, and getting mentorship myself. And I don't think you ever stop learning, do you? I have junior mentors now because I'm still trying to stay up to date with technology. It escapes me. So I'll give them some of the strategic stuff, and again, now you're going to have to show me some of this stuff. If I look at the influence that you're having within our profession, and I'm just getting a little bit serious for a moment. Did you find, the challenges of both being a woman and a woman of colour were things that you had to overcome in the workforce, that you felt you had to work a little bit harder than anybody else around you?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because I was always brought up anyway that I had to work twice as hard for half as much. That's kind of the mantra that's kind of often given to families. But personally, me, so when I first started doing the Read stuff, we asked people to share their stories. And, so I've heard some real horrific stories of actually overt and covert racism that people have experienced. Now, I've not necessarily experienced that. I have had a reasonably good career. There might have been microaggressions, but I think my way of coping through that is, and I do it as a reflex, is to code switch. So I don't know if you know what I mean by code switch. So I'm working in a global bank. So I adjust my tone, and kind of my language is slightly different to when I might be at home, or when I'm talking to friends, or when I'm talking to family. That's kind of what I mean by code switch. And so that's kind of what I have done. And there's also a little bit of a trope, it is, I think you would call it now, that because I don't put up with any nonsense, and I say what I think, and if someone wrongs me, then I will correct them, that can be seen as aggressive. So again, I've had to kind of really flex my style to not kind of play out those tropes. And one of the books that I read that helped me with that was the Daniel Goldman, I think it is, the EI book,
yes.
Emotional Intelligence. Yeah. So I try and flex my style depending on who I'm working with. But I live in London. It's pretty kind of multicultural. My relationship is a mixed relationship. So I'm not saying kind of what worries me, but I think now that people are sharing their stories, I'm a bit more alive to some of the maybe more microaggressions that people have to put up with.
Because I think we all kind of have a different context depending on the organisation, the maturity of the organisation, the people that we've worked with. And it's, when you've worked in organisations where you don't feel that you've had to fight as much for relevance when you get all of these biases around you. But it is surprising, the more people I talk to, where it has been a real issue. When I look at things like gender pay equity still being an issue today. We were talking about this 30 years ago when everybody said, oh no, we're now quite balanced. Well, 30 years later, we're still not balanced.
No. And I think there also has to be some acknowledgement that when you get to senior levels, it's a lot easier to pull some of this stuff out because you're not climbing as far up the ladder and you're not reliant on as much on people kind of to influence your career. And certainly me, I'm a consultant, so it's not as if I call someone out, they're going to be nixing my bonus or whatever, because that's not quite right. But I think as kind of senior communicators, we do have a responsibility, or you don't have to be a communicator, senior in any kind of role, so if you see things that aren't quite right, to call them out. So I've seen people maybe when they've been over-talked at meetings, for example, and take them to one side and say, you're all right about that, and then maybe give them a little bit of coaching as to kind of how they can handle it slightly differently in the next call. So I'm a little bit more alive to that.
And it really is about that, that awareness, isn't it? And getting people to be aware of their surroundings. I mean, you talked about Daniel Coleman and the work on emotional intelligence. Just recently, I've added that as a repertoire to the centre's offerings. We've got certified in being able to look at emotional intelligence and roll that out in organisations, in workshops and evaluations. And I think, when we look to the horizon for communication and the competencies of the future, that seems to be one of the big ones that we're looking towards, is really looking at. Have you got any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously there are hundreds of thousands of kind of books out there, and, there are people that kind of make their living in terms of kind of academic theory and things. But my thing is always about being able to apply what you're reading in real world situations. So for me, there was I was actually working with an individual, and I couldn't figure out why we got on a personal level, but on work, it just wasn't gelling. I'm very organised, structured, have a process and plans, and things are delivered well in advance of the deadline, typically. And I was always having to chase this particular individual. I don't understand why I'm having to keep chasing you. And it's because she happened to be very last minute, but get things done just in time in a much more loose way. So once I understood her working style, we had an agreement that I wouldn't chase her and she would deliver to me on time. And actually, it's a bit difficulty, isn't it? Kind of letting go of your natural, trying to kind of, it's due tomorrow and I've not seen any updates or anything yet. But actually, fair plays, it was mainly delivered, and we worked really, really well together once we understood how we worked. So it's about understanding kind of how you apply them, as opposed to kind of, always consistently on about the theory. So I think understanding about people, and the other thing I always say to communicators is understand, for goodness sake, understand how the business or the charity or the organisation that you're working is makes its money.
Yeah.
It never fails to astound me how, I've worked here for 10 years and I don't know kind of how much profit we make, where we make our profit, what the income drivers are. I mean, how can you be a reasonable communicator if you don't know, like, the most fundamental thing about your business? So they're the two things I would probably say to people to kind of, if they want to get on.
Yeah. Excellent. And thank you for sharing those tips, because it is always important, certainly in these podcasts, that we are able to give people tips and how they can help themselves in their career. Is there, I'm sorry, the time is just going so quick when we get chatting. But is there any, before we sign off, is there any last minute tips that you would like to share with communication professionals? Those are absolute pearls of wisdom, but any other advice you would give to up and coming communication professionals about their career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd give a couple, actually. So one is, hopefully with time, so one is nurture and develop your network before you need it. I had 2 phone calls last week from people saying, oh, I'm just about to leave this role when I need my next role, and can I join the association? I said, you can do all those things, but do them before you need it. You never know when they will come in handy. And the other thing I always talk to people about is PIEs, so performance, image, executive sponsorship. So in summary, what it means is that the more senior you get, the less it's about your performance, because your performance is a given, and it's more about how other people see you and how other people are advocating to you. So again, it's another thing around networking. There's slightly different flex on networking, but again, think about kind of the image you portray, kind of the brand you want to represent, and also don't just work with your immediate teams or your immediate managers. Step outside of your circle and get people advocating for you as well by demonstrating the value of what you do. So that's kind of what I would say.
Brilliant. Well, we've now got an acronym for everybody to follow with PIEs now, which is great.
Pies.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anne-Marie, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. And, the last time we spoke was probably 3 years ago in London for a very short catch-up.
Was it in London or was it in Vancouver? I can't remember.
Oh, actually, no. The last time we caught up was Vancouver, and the time before was London. That's right. So we reconnected in Vancouver. So we just have to pick another spot somewhere in the world where we can connect again next time, which I think is going to be New York.
New York in June. Really look forward to it.
And thank you again for joining me on A View from the Top.
No, and thank you for the time, Adrian. It's been an amazing conversation.
Brilliant. And thanks everyone for joining us on this episode of A View from the Top. And I look forward to being on A View from the Top in our next episode.